Now, Matt, the garage door geek, brought up a good point in a problem he was having. And I remember thinking back on that problem. And I had it happen quite a bit back in the early 90s with a lot of the Genies. And I'm going to show you what I did to fix that problem. Might or might not work for you every time depending on what it is. But you get to a stop, something's not working right. Just like with everything else, you start touching things and working your way down through the machine, figuring out what, wiggle a wiring harness, something lights up, okay, cool. I think in one of the cases I remember, it was the Genie light, sometimes would come on, sometimes wouldn't. You kind of trace that wire down to the wiring harness and start wiggling it. Next thing you know, it lights up. Cool. Now I've pinpointed it in either the wire, the wiring harness, or that prong that's attached to the circuit board. So now you got to take it apart. You pull the wiring harness off the board, flip the board over, follow that post to the back of the board. Sometimes you'll see a loose solder joint, cold solder joint, whatever. You can reheat it, plug it in, and you're good to go. If not, and on rare occasion I have found it to be just simply the wiring harness doesn't sit on there tight. It reaches the rest of the prongs, but it's not catching that one. So I got, before I get rid of this Sears here, I got the wiring harness on the board. I'll show you how to detach the wire from that particular portion of the wiring harness, and maybe you might be able to do a few things to it to make it fit over that post a little tighter. Let me see if I can get the camera zoomed in on it. Okay, I'm going to try to work behind the camera here. Typical circuit board, you got these prongs. Follow the prong down. You'll see a matching solder joint behind it. Typically, if you wiggle the prongs, you can see if you got a loose solder joint in there. Sometimes that causes it. Cold solder joint, loose solder joint, either way. But usually with a pair of Coke bottle glasses or a magnifying glass, you can check out the solder joint around the prong to see if it's connected. If it's not, that could be your problem. And typically I'll just reheat the joint and you're back up and running. But then you've got the ones that are connected. Let's just say this blue one right here. I follow that down and I decide this leads to my light switch or whatever, and it's not working right. I might wiggle it and see if it comes on and off. If it does, and I want to try to trace that wire, I'm simply going to pull it off and follow it over to here. Okay, the wire's pinched in there, and there's a little tab right there. Normally I use what I got on hand. I don't carry tools small enough to fit in there, so I'll use a staple. In this case I got finish nails lying on the workbench. So what I'll do is I'll take that little tab right there. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can get it up there close. Those silver tabs that go across are what is keeping this in. So if I take that and I depress it, I'm going to try to bend it in, because I know I can rebend it when I want to get it to lock in tighter. So just for sake of getting it out of there, I'm going to try to bend that in until I can pull this out. What that little metal tab does is it hooks on the plastic right there, and it won't let it come out. So I want to try to bend that enough that I know I can pull this out. An old machine like this is not going to cooperate that easy, but anyway, you see I got it out. And once you get it out of there, you can inspect it and see. Now you can see where there's a gap in there where the post for the circuit board is going to go in between that gap. If that post on that circuit board fits in there and it's not a tight fit, you could have intermittent problems. Sometimes it'll make a contact depending on the heat in the motor case. Sometimes it won't. But you can always take a fingernail file, a piece of sandpaper, whatever, stick it in between these contacts here, sand it a bit, and then take and bend that back in by hand. The Genie ones are a little bit different, but you know, same concept. That little tab right there, when you bend it in, allows you to pull it out of the wiring harness. So you can clean that contact up right there. You can bend it in a little bit more so it sits tighter together. Now I've got a tighter gap in there. The plastic housing also is going to keep it from going that wide, but you know, you clean it up, you squeeze it together a bit, then you pull this tab right here back out. Be careful not to break it. It's still a fairly snug fit inside of the wiring harness, so I'm not too worried about if it did, but I'm going to pry that out a little bit until I got an edge of it sticking out. Squeeze that back together, and then I'm going to shove it back in. I've done that on the Genies. I haven't done it on one of these machines. These older ones they're built pretty darn good, but especially the late 80s to late 90s Genies are very poorly constructed. So I snap it back into place. It grips. It won't come out now, and then you can try it. I've done that a few times, and I've had really good success with that. What otherwise would have been, a service guy out there saying, I don't know, I think you need a new circuit board. You'd put in a new circuit board, and maybe that does the same thing, and you're back out there fixing it again. So check the wiring harness. There is stuff you can do to these wiring harnesses to get them to, make a better contact. And same thing with a circuit board. Double check the posts on there. Make sure the solder joint's good. If you can't see the solder joint, but you have a soldering iron, you can always heat that up. It doesn't hurt. And I've seen them both. I've seen a cold solder joint, and I've seen a loose wiring harness. Anyway, that's one tip you can do while you're out there doing repairs if you ever have an intermittent problem like that. So Matt, we got this video out there for you, buddy. Give it a shot, and hopefully that'll work for you. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.